Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an upload full of exciting and terrifying encounters. I also have a little bit of information out of that great state of Washington. Before we get into all that, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss any of the informative and exciting uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And finally, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? All right, really quick before we jump into today's upload. A subscriber, we will just call him John. I'm not going to share the last name. Gifted me with a really cool gift. One that will go on the shelf behind me and join Bigfoot and the Bigfoot. Yesterday, I showed you guys what Ken, subscriber, gifted me. He gifted me that beautiful Schrade machete. Today, I have a stuffed animal Dogman. How cool. Well, actually, it'd be a werewolf. But how cool is that? I mean, jacked, just mean looking. That is so cool. Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. It's going right up on the shelf behind me. I never, it always amazes me that when you guys send a gift to me or say something amazingly nice, that, you know, how this community really is almost a family. You know, we're not blood related, but we are related in a common subject. Dogman, Bigfoot, things that go bump in the night, things that make our brains spin. Let's get into today's upload. Once again, thank you, John. All right, so last night, yesterday, we spent some time in the land down under. We had some very horrifying encounters with a little bit of Vegemite sandwiches. And for those of you who live in Australia, you'll laugh at that one. Anyway, I'm going to finish up the couple of encounters that I have out of there. And then I want to get into some information that I received today out of that great state of Washington. So let's start it off with Fraser Island, Queensland, Australia, 1983. We camped in a lightly forested area on the other side of a small hill or ridge from the beach. There was a small creek, and the area behind was more densely forested. At nights, my friend and I had been walking up the beach far away from camp, so his dad didn't bust us for smoking cigarettes. On the last night, we went in the opposite direction since we had stolen some glass Chinese fishing floats off of some poor guy who was camped down that way, and we didn't want to get busted by him either. It was a nice bright evening, and we had a small fridge magnet torch and a small radio cassette player. We were in a rocky area close to the hill that runs along the tree line, where there's some vines and brush starting to grow, and beyond the hill, it was more of a bushy area. It was here that we smelt a disgusting stench. It was very strong, permitting odor that hung thick in the air. My friend remarked that it had smelled like rotten eggs, thinking it was something like a dead brumby or buried fish heads. We started looking for the source of the odor. Getting closer to the bush and shining the torch around the rocks, we heard a noise. Then we found ourselves staring at one of those old gray dead driftwood trees that are along the beach on Fraser Island. There appeared a figure sitting close to the trunk on a large branch that jutted off to the left. We were standing there with this stink in the air, looking at the silhouette of this tree. We could see pretty well, but couldn't make out the shape on this branch. First we thought it looked like a monkey or a kid. Definitely was not a possum, as it kept changing positions and stretching out along the branch and kind of turned into a silhouetted shape. While we were discussing this and shining our torch around, a huge hulking figure suddenly appeared standing there, looking over the branch and facing our direction. We remarked that it was some bloke, when all of a sudden all hell broke loose. The branch was ripped away from the tree with a huge crack, then thrown or dropped to the ground with a huge thud. At that same time, this figure gave out a horrible, high-pitched scream, which turned into a huge, deep, roaring scream. At first, I thought the branch had fallen on him, and he was in pain, but it turned into a powerful scream roar that seemed to go on forever. We just stood there in shock, then took off back toward our camp and slightly toward the water away from the bush, with me in front and my mate close behind. We could hear the thing coming after us, and when I looked back, I could see this huge black hairy creature running on all fours with glowing red eyes. It was snorting like a bull while making an odd, high-pitched whining noise and running on an angle towards us at great speed. It almost made a noise like hoof hoof the whole time, which was unnerving as well. I've since heard this could be air escaping from its diaphragm and not an aggressive noise as I thought. Within a few seconds, it was right up beside us and running on two legs, slightly hunched over. He was sniffing and checking us out right there in this bizarre, twitchy, quivering movement of his head, having a real good look at us, just casually running beside us as we were running for our lives and looking over at this thing in a shocked amazement. At this close range, it looked basically like a real huge, ugly, naked, hairy man. His hair was long and shaggy, his face leathery like an elder Inuit or Eskimo person. He was also a bit froggy looking, with a wild-eyed look, and a bit like a large chimp with a leathery bat-like face. His body was massive like a bull, but bigger in the chest and shoulders. His arms were huge and very long, but more wiry compared to the rest of his body. The arms were long and thick like a sloth and had claws or fingernails. And the hair on its arms was like that of a chimp but longer, with some skin showing where he stretched. Maybe I was looking at his armpits. Although his skin appeared to be all black, up close he was lighter in the face. I don't remember his feet very well, but they seemed to think they were quite flat. He bared his teeth most of the time, which seemed to be more sharp and pointed. Basically, He was a huge, stinking, naked, froggy-looking Neanderthal man, covered in thick black hair, and very animal/ape-like. At first, when he closed in on us and reared up beside my mate, I thought for a second it was a human. And it was now time for us to fight this huge bloke, as we had a slim chance of getting away. Everything went weirdly calm, but for a bit, and then we lost it. We started swearing and abusing him out of terror. Then he went feral and started screaming and grunting at us. He was grunting and snorting the whole time, with this hoof noise and breathing heavily. My friend yelled at me to run closer to the water, so we moved to the firmer sand, and this hairy creature stayed where he was, running beside us, all hunched over, snorting and screaming like a mad, red-eyed black werewolf, all hunched over and close to the ground, with his arms pumping in an odd way suspended off the ground. He was running. He was turning to face us and really trying to scare us, screaming in some garbled language and snorting as he ran. He stayed beside us for a while before moving off closer to the tree line. It stuck by the tree line for a while, running ahead of us, maybe a few times like it was going to head us off, then dropped back, but we kept running straight. It then ran into the bush, sounding like a huge bull or elephant stomping and smashing everything in its path while making an incredible amount of noise. It was still going off at us with the screaming and stayed beside us, sometimes running in front and dropping back, thinking now, I wonder if there were two of them, as the noise was so intense. And possibly another one was stomping through the bush while the chase was happening. We could still smell it, and eventually things quieted down and we kept running all the way back to our tent, as we were sure it was still following us. We turned up exhausted and raving like lunatics that this huge, hairy creature had just chased us down the beach. That night there was this strange, chirpy chattering outside. Then it sounded like a possum or mammal, but it was kind of creepy and menacing. While this was happening, I could see a long, thin branch that was being repeatedly dragged over the top of the tent. The noise was making everyone uneasy, and my friend's dad had said that he didn't know what it was, but probably some kind of sugar glider or possum or small branch just rubbing against the tent with the wind. It went on throughout the night, but eventually we fell asleep. We left the next day and never went back to that spot to see what happened, although we wanted to. I don't know about any tracks in the sand, but there would have been a clear track through the bush from his trail of destruction. All in all, I have to say that this was both the strangest and scariest thing I'd ever experienced anywhere. I've seen sea snakes, sharks, scorpion, centipede. I've been followed by dingoes and nearly trampled by a brumby. Well, eel fishing on many trips I've had to the Fraser with my family, but I've never seen anything like this. My friend was sure that it was a Dogman, and I felt the same. We had both heard of them before, and there was nothing else it could have been, no matter how hard we tried to rationalize or figure it out. Finally, the only other trip I had went on with his family was to Black Butte, where his grandmother warned us matter-of-factly not to bother the hairy men if we see them, as they often cross her property. Anyway, my good buddy who shared this experience sadly passed away at quite a young age. He wanted to see a yowie, but he did get to see this creature before he passed. We may have had another experience, maybe this was a yowie, near Newell Highway rest stop a few years later. We had always known that what we saw that night, though, it was this hairy creature, and it was a terrifying experience to say the least. This creature caused so much mayhem and confusion, and it could have killed us within seconds if it wanted to. The amount of noise it had made was insane, along with the stomping and heavy breathing and the stench. It was like a nightmare. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. I still find it hard to comprehend the bizarre series of events that happened to me and my friend that night. Tonight's final experience out of Australia. 1994, July. Local man Pete and George, pseudonyms, were walking through a foresty track in the woods near their home of orphans, which is situated 20 miles from the city of Aberdeen. When nearing the end of the track, Pete saw a dark figure run from the trees on the left across the track, disappearing into the trees on the right. He at first thought it was a man, but the figure left a strange foreboding in Pete. George didn't see the figure and was busy telling Pete he was imagining things when a face appeared out of the trees behind Pete's back. George was chilled to the bone as the face he was looking at looked somewhat human, but not. It seemed to have a muzzle and very strange ears. It darted away as quickly as it had come when George threw a large stone in its direction. The two friends then left the area somewhat unnerved. A few weeks later, the two friends, along with a third, were having another encounter with this creature as they were driving along the road in two orphans approximately 2 miles from their meeting. In the witness's own words, suddenly from the side of the road there came this great muscular hairy figure bounding out of which started to run behind the car. At one point it caught up and ran alongside the vehicle, not seemingly out of breath as it approached speeds of 50 to 60 kilometers an hour. Pete describes the creature as strong and muscular, red glowing eyes, body covered in fur, about 6.5 feet tall, jet black. The figure, after several minutes, stopped abruptly in the middle of the road, leaving the terrified car occupants to carry upon their journey into the Trophin alone. As the creature faded slowly out of sight in the eerie glow of the car's red taillights, the same or similar creature was also reported by a lady who lives in an isolated cottage on the edge of the forest that Pete and George first saw this figure. She said she's seen it on 2 different occasions watching her house. Fleeting glances through high-powered binoculars as it darted through the forest. Ashire's Dundonald Hill, if anyone has seen the film Dog Soldiers, I'm sure they pitched the idea from this. Even hundreds of years ago, Dundonald Hill was said to be home of this creature, and not many dared venture out onto this hill alone with good reason. The dogs of Dundonald Castle were said to become very restless, agitated, and excited at times while looking toward the hill, barking and yelping. Never under any circumstance would they wander up it, or so I'm told. People have reported a strange creature, call it what you will, on a hill right up to the present time. Frightening folk have told of shadows that haunt the trees. One badly shaken man relayed how, when he was walking on the hill, he heard whispering voices behind him. Upon turning around, he saw nothing. This happened 2 or 3 times before he decided to take solace with a stiff drink from the local bar. Another man reports seeing two ghostly, squatted-like shapes, featureless shadows trailing him from nearby trees. These shadows then merged together as one, growing to twice its size. He then also left the hill, not wanting to see what happened next. This same entity has also been described as being able to jump straight into branches of trees as the creature in Fife. Dundonald Hill seems to figure heavy in the minds of locals as an area to be avoided, but nobody really seems to know why. School children in Irvine have said they dare not to go up as it is haunted, but when asked School children in Irvine have said that they dare not go up as it is haunted, but when asked what by, they don't know. I've been told that there is a high count of suicides in this area, with several youths having been found hanged on the hill, although I have not checked these facts out. A gentleman of Irvine had said that the hill has a presence that exudes in oppressiveness, and claims that many friends feel this same way about the place. J.A. from England says she will never go up that hill again as long as she lives. She had recently been spending time in Kilmarnock, summer of '94, and for a day out decided to visit the Dundonald Castle. While walking on the hill, her two Labradors suddenly went berserk, running around in circles, growling and snapping at the air before finally slinking to the ground as far as they could go, with their tails tucked, crawling backwards in obvious terror. Then Josephine saw this huge creature, which appeared some distance to the side of her. She had not been noticed it before, and she assures us that it had been earlier, she would most certainly have seen it. It did not seem to be solid, as Jay could see the grass on the hill through its body, but it was covered in longish charcoal-colored hair. It made no indentations in the grass, and Jay, on reflection, thought it ghost-like. The thing that struck the most terror was its eyes, two long slits which glowed bright red. It had two holes where its nose should have been, very thick lips. In fact, it was not dissimilar to that of a gorilla shape, although it stood over 10 feet tall on its hind legs. When confronted by the strange sight, Jay began to pray. The creature, after a few moments, slowly faded out of sight, but the dog's attitude never changed, and the English woman felt sure that the monster was still around. Jay left Dundonald Hill in a hurry, not too far behind her whimpering dogs. George, who likes to spend a lot of time fishing, walking, and camping, decided to spend a night on the hill during the summer of '93. He took his dog Rover, who had never left his side since he was a pup. He arrived just after the sun began to set and erected his one-man tent, deciding to settle down with a book. He lay atop of his sleeping bag, fully dressed. About an hour, George saw a shadow pass by the side of his tent through the lamplight. He thought it was strange that anybody would be in that area this time of night. Again, the shadows loomed over the tent, and at this point George swears that he heard kind of a rasping breathing sound. By this time, he had come to the conclusion that some of his mates had come up to play a joke on him. He said to himself that he would not raise to the bait, and once again settled down with his book. George's heart then leapt into his mouth when the tent violently shook, as though somebody had tripped over the guide rope. At this, George went outside to look, his nervousness turning into apprehension when he'd found the area outside the tent totally deserted. He quickly went back inside the tent, securing the flaps as tight as they could. By this time, Rover was whimpering and cowering in the corner. Then the tent began to sway as if caught in some strong wind. George sat on top of his sleeping bag, now too scared to even contemplate sleeping. The secured flaps suddenly burst wide open. The dog, who had never left George's side, gave out this almighty yelp and ran off into the darkness. Someone or something then grabbed a hold of George's ankle. Slowly but surely, the man was pulled out of his tent. He could not see anyone, and he struggled desperately, but the grip did not loosen. When he then had been pulled about 10 feet clear from the tent's entrance, this invisible force lifted George clear off the ground, his head 2 inches off the grass. The sky was black, a clap of thunder rang out, and a streak of lightning flashed across the sky. Then suddenly the grip let go of his ankle and George fell limp into the grass, petrified. George ran back to his tent, the sky clearing as he did. He then spent a very tense night, sat at the entrance of his tent, too scared to make his way home in the dark, jumping at every little noise that the night had made, which seemed to surround him like a huge black blanket. He had called Rover often, but each time, which seemed the dog failed to answer. Morning eventually came, and after packing away his belongings, he headed down the hill. He reached the bottom. Rover came bounding out of the undergrowth toward him, and they both went home together. George has never been up the hill since, and he has no intentions of ever doing so again. He can offer no explanation on what happened to him, only that it was a very real experience. He does express hurt at his dog leaving him, a thing which has never done before. Just a footnote, yellow frogs have been found around the actual castle, as well as some red markings. Dundonald Hill and the surrounding area has been a source of mysterious phenomena. Large cats have been seen in the area for decades. It's long been a UFO hotspot. The castle sits atop of a hill, has its fair share of ghosts as well. That was pretty awesome. That whole area, that Dundonald Hill area, has a creature running around very similar to what was depicted in the movie Dog Soldiers. Man, that is cool. Very cool. All right, let's get into tonight's second part of the upload. We're going back to the United States for this one, in that great state of Kentucky. Last year, in June of 2022, 17 cats went missing from my ranch. I have a private rescue providing heated cat hotels, food, a lake, 7 stalls, a medical care for 40 to 45 cats. We have bear, mountain lion, and deer as well, all wild. This is on the Kentucky-Tennessee state line. One morning, last August, my German Shepherd and I were on our morning walk when a vomit-inducing stench crossed our winds. It was a horrid smell of urine, dead rotting flesh, and feces. My dog started growling as we approached the end of our 29-foot camper in the driveway. He then went nuts, charging against his leash, barking, jumping 4 to 5 feet in the air, right in front of us. Then he pinned his shoulder to my knee and pulled me to the left, then back to the center, then back to right, back to center, this whole time staring up at a 45-degree angle. The hair on my neck rised slowly, and I pulled my .44 caliber pistol for a possible shot from the hip. I practice hip shooting a lot. I noticed with the barrel pointed out. It was level with the ground, but when I pointed it to where my dog's nose was pointed, it was 8 to 9 feet above the ground. I have trained most of my life to remain calm during a crisis. Noting how high the muzzle was pointed, the stench, my dog's behavior, and my location, I thought I may be looking at some sort of cloaked Bigfoot or some sort of creature invisible to humans but not dogs. I began talking to it in a calm, slow, baritone command voice. I told it that I was tired of it killing my cats. My cats are my kids. Feeding them, housing them, giving them meds, and protecting them is my job. If it didn't stop using them as snacks, that I would kill it. I don't want to kill it, but I will, I said. Stop killing my cats. There are a lot more humans than there are of your type. How would you like to be hunted down? As I finished, my dog sat, but continued to stare 9 feet off the ground. Soon the stench was gone and my dog relaxed. Over the next couple of months, I began to see rabbit, skunk, deer, and coyote, and my cat stopped disappearing. I'm a retired airline pilot and former Special Force soldier. And I also worked 10 years as a police officer. I live near Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I am a believer. Tonight's final bit of information is very strange and very disturbing. And you will soon see why. The events took place in December of 2022 in Gov'T National Park, northeastern part of Washington State, in an area near Big Meadow Lake. The man that reached out to me via email was a former forest ranger, and we had talked for about 15, maybe 20 minutes. Today, he didn't want to get too deep into it. He was forced into early retirement. In December of 2022, there was a investment banker and another young man. The investment banker was in his 30s. Lived in Moscow, Idaho, which is north central Idaho, which I want you to think about this in a second about what went down. He and his friend were found torn apart. This forest ranger and another forest ranger had stumbled upon their makeshift campsite. They were camping illegally in the area of Big Meadow Lake. Now, they then called they then called the state police. The state police came, looked around. After the state police came in, a helicopter landed in Meadow Creek Road / Settlers Way, or 2695, and he was sent with a pickup truck to pick up 6 men that emerged from this helicopter. Crazy enough, these 6 men went hunting after something that he was not privy to seeing. He did hear a large firefight erupt, or not even a firefight, a large just barrage of bullets flying. Something was lugged out of the woods. He and his buddy were forced out of the area, and they then these 6 men took the pickup truck. After whatever was loaded into the back of the pickup truck, they brought the pickup truck back, or actually one person brought the pickup truck back, and they loaded up the 2 bodies of the men in the back of the pickup truck and were escorted back to the helicopter, where the 5 remaining men were standing outside of the helicopter. They loaded the bodies of the 2 men in the helicopter. As they were loading the bodies in, not the park rangers. The park rangers were kept away from the helicopter. But as the bodies were being loaded into the helicopter, this park ranger had caught sight of some sort of foot and the lower part of the leg. It was a large, thick leg. It had an odd-shaped foot. He said it looked to have 3 to 4 kind of toes with a elongated heel. The leg was hairy, the foot was hairy, and there was kind of a long toenail-like claw on each toe. He didn't see anything else other than that. He did say that it was not a bear. 100% was not a bear. This is strange, and he told me why this is all strange, okay? This location where this happened was almost a straight line from where the experience in the Kootenai National Forest in Montana, just on the Idaho Panhandle there, occurred. So, literally a straight line. There had been a Dogman attack in that area, if you don't recall, where the people were brought to Maelstrom. He said, I found that strange when I heard that experience on your channel. But what he found even stranger was where these people were from. These 2 young men. They were in their 30s. And he kept looking and asking questions, and he thinks that's why he was let go, is because he couldn't stop asking questions. These young men were from Moscow, Idaho, where the 4 college students were killed a month previous. This has nothing to do with that case, but he believes firmly that the deaths of these men were covered up and just kind of swept under the rug because of a incredibly disgusting homicide that occurred in Moscow, those 4 college students. But he truly believes that that's why he was fired, because he couldn't stop asking questions about it, and he kept looking into it. And every time he'd look into it and he couldn't find any information about these guys, why aren't they talking about these guys, in Idaho? When are we going to talk about this? What's going on? What was the foot that I saw? Shortly thereafter, he was due up for retirement in 6 or 7 years, he said. He got a full retirement package, and said, just take it and go. live the rest of your life. He always found that odd. He's been sitting on this for, what, now about six or 7 months. And he is 100% sure that this was a cover-up, and that the government took full advantage of that homicide taking place to cover this up. He said whatever the creature was, that the men that loaded it in the truck, there was no blood. There was almost nothing that was even reminiscent of something being in the back of the truck. But the two young men, and I say young because I'm 47, they're 30, they were not, there was blood and remnants from them, even though they were in body bags. This creature was wrapped in a tarp, but that's how secretive they were. They cleaned the back of the truck before even driving back to pick up the men, the two bodies. So I found that really strange. He never saw the creature except for the heel and the foot and partial of the leg, but that's definitely something strange happened and occurred right there. And it's pretty crazy. So anyway, guys, I want to thank you for supporting this channel. Truly means the world to me that you guys have my back. And thank you for your prayers and well wishes. Please, we are in the beginning of summer right now. Camping is starting, fishing, boating, whatever, hiking. Keep an eye on your children, your pets, your family, your loved ones, because these creatures are out there. They are keeping an eye on them as well. And they don't care what happens to us. We are feed to them. We are sheep. So keep an eye on your loved ones, and God bless.